Hello, this is Mike Live from Great American Insurance Company, and today we're going to create a simple bowling game using TDD. So let's get started in IntelliJ. Go File, New, Project. Go ahead and select. We're going to create a simple Java game. And let's call this Bowling with TDD. Hit Finish. Choose this window and go ahead and hit return, and we're going to create some folders real quick. So we're going to start using a lot of shortcut keys, so I want to hit Alt Insert. I'm going to create a package and scroll down here to package, and we'll call this Bowling Game. In here I'll put a class, so Alt Insert, insert a class, and you can see down here at the bottom my shortcuts are showing. And we'll call this Bowling Test. I don't need any of this code here, so I'm going to select it and get rid of it. I got a little template I'm going to use for my environment, so called envb. This is a live template I created before this presentation. But first it wants an input name, but let's put that in first. And we'll call this Bowling Test. Cool. See here. And let's add the unit to class path. Okay. And we're all ready to go. And the reason I'm generating this class is just a test to make sure my system's functioning. This has nothing to do with TDD really. It's just to make sure that IntelliJ is going to give me what I need to write the program. That's going to compile this and make sure the JUnit is working. So Control Shift F10. And so this passed and I'm good. So I can start thinking about writing tests. So I'm going to arrow down here. I'm going to get rid of this. Control W to select a method. Go ahead and delete that, backspace that. And now let's start thinking about the simplest thing I can write. Well, I got a bowling game, and the game's going to have scores and rolls. So let's create this game first. So I'm actually use TDD to actually create the code for me. I'm not writing the code and then the test. I'm writing the test to create the code. And I'm going to do three things. I'm going to first write a failing test. I'm going to pass that test. I'm going to refactor. So let's start off by just creating a game. So let's create a test. And I have this little live template I'm using for that. And I'm going to call this can create game. So in the initial setup, I'm going to be writing some methods to help me set the code up. Then I'll actually be getting rid of those methods. And that's good. Let's return. And we'll go ahead and tab over here and we'll use game G equals new game. Looks pretty good. And it doesn't compile, so I don't have to run this because it's got the red. I know it's not going to work. So let's make this into a function. So if I hit Alt Enter, it gives me the ability to create the function, which is fantastic. Boy, this is easy. And if you look over here, I have a method that's been created, and next to that is the test code. And so you ask the question in TDD, what tests the test? It's production code that tests a test, and a test tests a production code. So it's kind of a dual entry system if you are familiar with accounting. Okay, so let me make a point real quick here. You have a comment up here. You don't need this comment. You know who wrote what when using GitHub. So let's get rid of that. That's a unneeded comment. This clutters the code. And we have created our game, so this should compile. So we're going to Alt over. And let's go ahead and run this. Control Shift F10. And so that works. We create our first method. So let's go down and say, what's the next simplest thing we can do? And once again, just kind of setting it up. I'll use my template, and I'm going to do a can roll. I want to be able to roll. And I'm going to do something I shouldn't do in coding, and I'm going to copy some code, but I'm going to get rid of that. Whenever I duplicate code, that's a bad thing. So remember, we're going to need to refactor this. So let's go ahead and copy this by going Control D, and I'm going to bring this down. Let's select Control W to select that, and we're going to Alt Shift to actually bring that down. So I've got that, and we're going to create a roll method. So we'll go G.roll 0. Of course, that doesn't compile. I don't have to test that. I can see the red. It doesn't work. So let's go and create a method out of it. Alt Enter does that, and create method. And in my method over here, I'm just going to change I to pins. Making some good progress here. And that should compile. We don't have to do anything. We're going to write the minimum amount of code we need to make this work, Alt over. And I'm going to go, okay, let's see if this compiles. F10. And yes, indeed, control does work. So I need to refactor here because I have two game G's. So I had a failing test. It passed. Let's refactor. And let's turn this G into a field. So we'll hit Control Alt F to create a field. I want it to be in setup. I hit enter. And now I have this nice setup method at the top here. And before. And so I don't even need this anymore. Let's get rid of it. Nor do I need the game, so let's Control Y to delete that line. And let's once again let's compile and see if this works. And yes, indeed, my can roll method works. So what's the next simplest test I can write? The next simplest thing I can do is a gutter game. So let's do a gutter game. Now the thing about a gutter game to keep in mind is in order to have a gutter game, I need to be able to score. So let's go ahead and call this gutter game. And I need to be able to score. So in order to score, I need to iterate all that stuff. So let's do this real quick. What do I need? I need a for loop. So I kind of have something in here, kind of a little template. And I'm going to have 20 of those. And in that, I'm going to actually G-roll zeros. I've done that before. So I'm sending this over to my game method when I roll. But that's not quite enough. I need to do an assert equals. Now I've got my assert going. And I'm going to do what? I'm going to want to assert that this is 0. And I need a score method. And so now I'm actually just using TDD to write methods. And of course it doesn't compile. I don't even have to run this. I know if I get a red, it's not working. And so I need to create that method. I'm going to do Alt-Enter. Create. And here's my score method. And to make this, we're going to make this fail first. So I'm going to return a -1. So let's use your Alt arrow key to get back to the previous code. Let's compile this and see if it fails. Oh good, that is a failing test. So let's go back, Alt the over, and let's go ahead and make this pass. And I'll turn this into a 0, and that should indeed pass. And so if I go down here and run and compile this, woohoo, both tests run. So let's look at this. Can I refactor this? Any? And at this point, no, but I will refactor that for loop in a moment. So what's the next simplest test I can write? And I think that would be all ones. I'm going to roll all ones. That's good. And how would I roll all ones? I'm actually going to go up here and copy some code. Duplicate code is bad, but we're going to clean it up in our next iteration when we refactor. So let's do a Control W just to copy all this. I'm going to do a Control D to duplicate, and I'm going to use an Alt Shift to actually move it down. Okay, cool. And at this point, I want to roll all ones, so I want my roll to be a 1. And I want my score at the end of the day to be 20. All right, so let's go ahead and compile this and see if it runs, see if it works. Controls F10. And all ones fails, of course. So I need to go over to the other side and let's write some code to pass this test. So I could put a 20 in here, and that would work. But then the other test would fail. So let's go back to 0 and see if we can do something a little smarter. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something to keep track of the score. That's what I've been wanting to do all along. I'll just create a little private variable. Now once again, see what I'm doing? I'm doing the basic, the simplest thing that I can do to make this code pass. So let's create a private int. We will call this score, and we'll start off with 0. And now what I want to do is actually kind of accumulate that score through my roll methods, because roll is coming in here. I'm going to do a plus equals, and that equals pins. That's pretty good. That's what's coming over. And then I'm going to return that score. Cool. Let's see if this compiles. And let's go ahead and run this. Yay, all 3 tests pass. Now, interestingly, I have assert here, I have an assert here, but I don't have any assert here. Do I really need this test anymore? And the answer is no. You can actually get rid of this one. So let's get rid of it. I just used it to write the initial code. And you're going to do this, you're going to write tests, you're going to no longer need them, just delete them. Control W, select this. Let's delete it. And let's compile again and see if it works. And it does. So I have these 2 methods and I want to refactor. And I see that I have duplicate code. Duplicate code is bad. But this happens in loops lots of times. You need to make them parametric. And the way to make them parametric is pull out some of the variables. So I'll make this loop parametric right here. And I'm going to go, well, let's take this 20 and make it an n. And I'm going to go, okay, int n equals 20. Okay, I'm happy with that. And let's do the same thing with pins. Let's just pull this out so we have some control over it. Call this pins. And I'm going to create int pins equals 20. Cool. And now I can actually, in a sense, create a method out of this. So let's highlight that. I'll hit Control Alt M to create a method. And I'm going to call this roll mini. Cool. And I'm going to hit yes because I have some fragment code out there and actually changed both of them. Did you see that? And it created this roll mini method. I'm going to take this roll mini method and I'm going to pull it up to the top. And go back to that. Select my roll mini method. Hit Alt Shift. Let's bring it up to the top. Get it out of the way. All right. There you go with all my private variables. And private methods will go right there. Come back down here. I've refactored my code. I no longer need these 2 integers. Just use that to write the method. I'm actually going to use this by rolling 20. And I expect a 1. And down here I rolled 20. Excuse me, I expect a 0. And down here I rolled 20 and I expect a 1. Let's see if that still works. Control Shift F10. And yes, indeed, everything still works. So let's go down and actually write another test. So now let's think about the next simplest test I can write. Well, I passed 1s, and 2s I know will pass, 3s will pass, 4s will pass. So don't write tests that you know are going to pass. Let's try 5. That would be a spare. So let's write 1 spare. So we'll write a method called 1 spare. We're going to roll 1 spare. Enter. And we can go, okay, well, g.roll. I'm going to roll 5. I'm going to duplicate this a few times. Control D, another 5, and let's roll the last one. Let's make that a 3. And you're going to go, Mike, look, your code's off. What are you going to do? Well, I could tab each one over, or I can use Control Alt L, which will format the code for me. If you highlight a section, you can do Control I, which will format it as well. Now at this point, I'm rolling a spare, but that's not it, because I only roll 3 balls. I need to roll the rest of them. I got 17 more balls to roll, and they all need to be gutter balls. So let's use my roll mini method. There you go. And so I'm going to roll, what, 17 more balls, and they're all going to be 0. Cool. And actually, I do that. I should assert the score. What should the score be? Well, it's 5 plus 5 plus 3 plus 3 again, which should be 16. Assert equals 16. G.score. There you go. And we're going to see if that passes. So let's go and do a compile. F10. And of course, 1 spare fails. And if you just run the entire thing, and you can see that 1's passed, gutter passed, but 1 spare fails as we expected. Let's go to the other side. Let's go to the game code and see if we can fix this failing test. So looking at this, I actually kind of have a gut instinct that maybe I want to do something like this. If pins plus last pin equals 10. And that would give me the condition for a spare. But I have a problem with this, and I have this static flag, and I've always had a problem with static flags. So what's going to have to happen here is going to have to clear it and set it and clear it and set it. If I have 3 or 4 static flags, I got to clear and set and clear and set. And next thing I know, I need a singleton, and it just gets more and more complicated. So I have to think about this just a little bit. This is not going to work. And as I look at this, I'm starting to realize I need to look back and get previous, or look forward and get the whole game and kind of do some calculations. So I know I have to have some type of storage. Now looking at this code, I realize I've actually violated a design principle. And that design principle is a misrepresentation of responsibility. And so the reason I say that is because I'm saying that my score is here and my rolls are here, but really where am I calculating the score? And I'm calculating the score in the rolled method. Well, I really need to calculate the score in the score method. And this happens all the time. You go into code and you find a function and it says it does one thing, but it doesn't. That's hidden somewhere else. And that reduces your maintainability and everything else. And lots of other bad things happen. So, and I need some storage. And so let's kind of create some variables and see if we can get our representation right. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an array. We'll call it rolls. And that equal new int. And we'll give it an argument of 21. Because we have 21 rolls. And I want to know where my current roll is, so I'll create another int. Whenever you want to do that array type of stuff, you really want to know where you're at in that array. So a current roll, right now it starts off at 0. Okay, we're doing fine here. So I need to be able to use this. And so let's load this array. So we're going to go down to the next, and we're going to create rolls, and we'll just create a little variable here. That's not going to quite work. Let's try something else. I want to load rolls with pins, but I is not going to work. Well, hey, I got this current roll. Let's do that. Current roll. Roll. And if I put the plus plus afterwards, it'll iterate after I load the variable. So let's put plus plus. And so now that keeps track of my current rolls. And now I can create my score method. And I'm going to need I'm going to add everything up using a for loop. So let's use my for loop. And let's do rolls.length. Cool. And at that, we're going to add everything up. Score plus equals rolls I. There you go. And so that should give me the correct score. So now I'm going to run this and see if it works. So let's go ahead and run it. Alt over, and let's run the code. F10. And this failed. And if you come down here in the bottom of the screen, you can actually see that I got a 16. Or I expected a 16, I got a 13. And I knew it was going to fail. So let's go ahead and ignore this because we're not quite right. I want to see if the code that I wrote previously that I just refactored is working. So let's go ahead and get rid of this test because we've got another design problem. And let's run it again. Just make sure my present code is running. So we see the ones in the gutter game are still functioning correctly. That's great. And if I alt over, I can see that my method of now putting the responsibility in the score method is actually working. And so I'm kind of tempted here. What I kind of want to do, well, I got to work with my spare. So I'm thinking, well, if I do if now rolls, let's say I, some I that I'm going to come up with, plus rolls I plus 1 equals 10. That's a spare, and that might work. But there's some other bowling rules that I violate when I do that, so I'll need to do something like a mod. So I could do like I mod 2 to kind of get some issues taken care of. And now I'm adding more and more, and my eyes aren't right, and I'm going, well, I have a problem. And so when you start hacking like this, and you've written some codes, you have to sit back and kind of have a little bit of design and think, am I screwing up? Is there something I'm doing wrong? And yet, once again, we have another design issue. And that's really crazy because we only got two methods, and I already have a design problem. And my design problem is that I'm thinking in terms of roles, but that's not what I'm doing in a game. In a game, I'm rolled, yes, but those are resulting in frames. So I should be stepping through frames and not rolls. So let's fix that. So I'm going to get rid of this, Control Y, this doesn't work. And now I'm going to change I to frames. And that's always going to be less than 10. Now I'm stepping through frames, and every time I step through a frame, I'm going to iterate I by 2. I equals plus equals 2. But if I'm going to do that, then I need to add all the balls together. And so I have this little int I, so let's go ahead and put int I up here so it's taken care of. Int I will start off with as 0. All right, that's pretty cool. And if I want to have 2 balls in a frame, then I'm going to want to do that. So that's plus I, and then rolls I plus 1. All right, so I haven't done anything as far as that test I ignored yet. And I can see there's an issue here. Let's change this to frame. But let's see if our code still works. And yes, my ones and my gutter game is still passing, but I still haven't done anything with the ignore method. So let's take a look at my one spare and see if I can get it to pass now. So let's go back, and we're going to go over, and let's see this. It still fails. Yes, my one spare still fails, so now let's get it passing. So now I've kind of set up the right conceptual framework, and now I can use my if statement. So I'm coming along here, and I'm going to add my if statement, and what should I do here? And then I want this over here to be an else if. So if this doesn't work, let's do an else here. All right. And we're going to move the score around. You actually don't have to cut or paste. You can just highlight this and use your Alt Shift, bring that down. We're going to need another bracket, and of course it's all messed up, so Control Alt to get your formatting right, so that should be fine. And in here I need to have a condition, and I'm going to put an if statement here. So if rolls I plus rolls I plus 1 equals 10. That's my 10 right there. So if that's a spare, then what I want to do in that spare, I want to go score plus equals 10 plus the next ball. And the next ball is going to be rolls I plus 2. Cool. And then I want to again iterate by 2. Cool. And that works out. And I've got some issues with my else method when I have too many brackets here. There you go. Let's see, we've got another issue. Not a parenthesis. Boy, I messed this code up. Alright, looking pretty good. So let's see if this runs. So I'm going to, got another bracket issue here. So I need one more. There we go. Everything's right. All my brackets are right, and my return score is in the right place. So we're going to scroll over and see if this test passed. And indeed, once again, my one spare passes. I can see right now I've got a naming issue right here, so let's change this to one spare. There we go. And let's just go ahead and run it again to make sure everything's okay. And one spare. Okay. I want to refactor here because I don't like this being a thing. I want to actually have this code read as if it's well-written prose. And so a 5 and a 5 is a spare. So let's refactor this and call this Control M is roll spare. All right. Hit OK. At this point, I've got this private method. I'm going ahead and highlight this, and I'll go ahead and Shift Alt and bring it up with the rest of my private methods. Cool. At this point, I ask myself, is there anything else I can refactor? The answer is no. The next question is, what's the next simplest test I can run? And I did a spare. What about a strike? So let's do a strike. And I'm going to call this one strike. Hit enter. And what happens with a strike? Well, let's do a 10. So let's roll a 10. And I'll duplicate this a few times. And then I'm going to roll a 3 and a 4. And then I want to do an assert on this, but I need to do a roll many. So how many have I rolled here? So let's just put in my roll many. And I'm going to do a 16 and with a score of 0. That gives me my 20. And then I want to assert on here. So I'm going to assert. And if you add this up correctly, you're going to see the score needs to be assert equals 24 and g.score. Cool. And this, of course, the formatting is all messed up, so just hit Control Alt L, fix your formatting, and let's see if this test runs. Of course, it's not going to run, so let's go ahead and make sure it doesn't run. Control Shift F10. And my on strike, I keep spelling on wrong, so let's change this to one strike. And once again, compile and run. Make sure I didn't do anything stupid. And that test is failing, so let's make it pass. So I'm going to hit a Alt over to my game code. And I got a little design patterning happening here, so really all I need to do is just add another if statement. It's pretty easy now at this point. So what's the condition? Well, if the roll, say rolls I, is equal to 10, that would be a strike, and I'll put a little thing in here, and of course the next one's going to be an else if. I'm going to just change this to an else if and open this up. And so what's the condition here? Well, let's see here. If this happens, then I'm going to want to add score plus equals 10 plus the next two balls. So plus rolls I plus 1 plus rolls I plus 2, and I'm only going to need to iterate this frame by 1. So I plus equals 1. All right. We're going to check and see if this works. So let's go ahead and move over to the next frame. Let's go ahead and roll this and see if it works. Or run it. Let's compile it. And indeed it passes. Wow, that's pretty cool. Let's once again get this reading as prose. So I want to do a little bit of refactoring here. I'll just do Control Alt M to refactor this in method. I'll call this roll spare. Oh, roll spare is wrong. Roll strike. There you go. Good. And roll strike's a nice little method. And I can now actually just move that back up with the rest of my methods. So Alt Shift, roll it up, move it up. And let's run it again to make sure it works. And Control Shift F10. And that's pretty sweet, and all my methods are rolling pretty nice. And so let me see, what's the next simplest thing I can create? Let's try a test. Let's do a perfect game. I call this a perfect game. And What would be a perfect game? Well, a perfect game in bowling would be to roll all strikes. And so let's do a roll mini. And let's roll 12 of them, and each one be a 10. And I'm going to assert that that's going to equal 300, right? And of course, I expect this to fail. So let's go ahead and run it. Oh, it didn't fail. It's passed. Matter of fact, I'm done. Just through this simple exercise, I built my code, but I'm going to do a little bit more refactoring on this game. I want this to read like well-written prose. So let's start working with this a little bit to make it do that. So I have frames. Oh, this I is all messed up. I should have refactored this before. So I want to change this I. It's just, ugly. It doesn't read like well-written prose. I don't know what it means. So let's do a Shift F6. And I'm going to go first in frame. Makes sense. First ball in frame. And it's nice when you do the Shift F6 because you actually change all the I's. And this next one, let's start taking a look at this. We want this to read very nicely. Let's highlight this and call this a strike. So we're going to say, write it as it's a Boolean, so let's write it as a predicate. We'll call it is strike. So Control M, Control Alt M, and make sure we get it all. Control Alt M. Oh, it says my name is not refinished. Hit enter. There you go. So let's Control Alt M on this one. And let's call this is strike. Okay, that's pretty nice. No, we have more fragments to take care of. So that starts to read. And then right here, if it's a strike, we're going to add 10. Let's just say next 2 balls per strike. So we're going to add the next 2 balls per strike. So let's name this as next 2 balls for strike, and just making it look like, just read like a sentence. So I don't need any comments because my code tells me what it's doing. And come down here to the next one, and if what? So if a spare, so is spare, so let's highlight this. And we're going to Control Alt M, is spare. So if it's a spare, what do I want to do? Well, if it's a spare, then I want to come down here and I want to what? Add next ball. So add next ball. Hey, for spare. What the heck? Tells me what it's doing. I like that. No. And down here, 2 balls in frame. That's really all I'm doing right here. So let's create another method. Go 2 balls in frame. And so using TDD, so indeed now if you look at this, my code is now reading like well-written prose. I can look at it and know exactly what it's doing. I got one more change here, but let's make sure this is working. So let's move on over. Let's compile this and see if I didn't screw anything up in the process of all that refactoring. F10. And bring this up. And we see indeed all tests passed. Yes, one more thing. Alt over. And I'm going to do something here with the for method. So Control W to select that. And I'm just going to get a little fancy here. Forgive me for this. I'm going to go rules of bowling. Because that's really what this is. If you go through bowling, what the rules are, you got them right here. Nice thing about this, if you decide you want to make another game later on, you know where your rules are. So it all makes logical sense. So if you use TDD to write your code, you'll decouple your methods and you'll actually come to a stronger, more maintainable design. Let's make sure this works. And all tests passed. Thank you so much for listening. Welcome to the wonderful world of TDD. I am just loving it. This was Mike Lively for Great American Insurance Company. Thanks for listening.